All right. Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you all for joining. We're going to go ahead and get started. So we're talking about chambers. So these are some of the words that people say to us. I hate the process. I'm frustrated and bugging my clients every year. Is this even worthwhile? It takes so much time. I want to give up. I mean, these are the things that law firms and in-house marketers are talking to us all the time when it comes to chambers. It can be a very frustrating process. We've heard it from many. We've even gotten frustrated ourselves. And so we're going to talk today about how to get the coveted chambers ranking and is it worthwhile? So just a quick introduction. This is my fabulous team. We are a marketing and public relations firm. We specialize in working with law firms. We really focus on creating the visibility and credibility that fuels revenue growth. We host several webinars throughout the year, so we appreciate those who are listening in, and we talk about a variety of subjects. So I want to start off with a poll. So I'm going to send all the panelists right now a poll. I'd love for you to participate. So there's some questions about if you've submitted before, if you think it's the most coveted, and how many years have you gone after the ranking. So I would appreciate if everyone could vote, and I will read off the results. I see everyone voting. I'll give you about 10 more seconds to vote. Okay, so the voting that we have is in. So half of you have submitted, the other half have not. Majority, 75%, think, in your opinion, it's the most coveted ranking, while a few do not think it's the coveted ranking. And it looks like many of you have gone after it at least once or twice, a majority, and then there's a big fraction that has gone even more. So we've got about 15% for 3 to 5 years and another 15% for about 5 or more years. So thank you for participating. That gives me a good understanding of where everybody comes in. I want to start with a very quick refresher. So what is Chambers? For those that don't know, it's an in-depth guide to ranking lawyers and law firms worldwide. Right now, they have about over 200 jurisdictions and over 100 practice areas that they rank for. Many consider Chambers to be the most coveted ranking, and we'll talk about why that is. They continue to expand. They've added new tables, new practice areas, new jurisdictions. They're always looking to sort of evolve with the legal landscape. But the most important thing is it's really a very high degree of selectivity. Only 2% of law firms, US law firms, are ranked. So it is really one of the toughest lists to get on. And here are some of the numbers as Chambers has it on their website. So they've got about 19,000 total number of lawyer rankings. They have about 7,000 firm rankings. So this is a really, really small amount of lawyers and law firms. And they have, the number that I thought was interesting is 1,825 newly ranked lawyers. 32% of those are female. So as you can see, it's a tough list. It's an exclusive list. One of the things that you should know is you cannot buy your way into Chambers. There's a lot of pay-to-play nominations out there. This is not one of them. So you cannot buy your way in. So let's talk about, why is Chambers such a big deal? Okay, so first, I'd like to address the history of legal rankings and directories. So when legal rankings and directories were first introduced to us many, many years ago, think about it, it was really like the yellow pages for law firms. And this really, I felt like Martindale-Hubbell started sort of the world of directories. And it was a comprehensive directory of law firms and lawyers, and you can find them by practice area. And by comprehensive, I mean, it really just included every kind of lawyer, regardless of the caliber. So then The next evolution came where it was the introduction of exclusive rankings, insert chambers. So then you started to see other kinds of directories where they were ranking people based on the caliber of their work. And chambers, the things that they describe what they're looking for is listed here on the screen: industry knowledge, technical ability, value, and client service. So that's what they're really seeking in terms of their rankings. So the million-dollar question is, of course, who is using these directories? And most people, they ask us, are in-house counsel or corporate counsel using these directories? And the answer is truly 50-50. You know, I've attended several conferences where there have been a panel of in-house counsel or corporate counsel, and this very question is asked because marketers all around the world are wondering if you know, people are actually looking at this. And usually what we see at these conferences is half the panelists raise their hand that they're looking at it and the other half doesn't. So I think the verdict is still out. However, one of the things that we've seen time and time again is the people who do look at these rankings, they're really trying to find people who are in jurisdictions that maybe they're not quite familiar with, or they're looking for a really particular lawyer that has a industry expertise that they're maybe not familiar with, so an unfamiliar practice area. So we've heard that. We've also heard that a lot of in-house counsel and corporate counsel use it to help shortlist a certain number of attorneys or law firms to interview. So those are some of the reasons we've heard folks use it. But of course, the question, the billion-dollar question is Chambers worth it? For those that have gone after it, and we'll talk about this, you know, it's a really extensive process. It's very competitive, and everyone sort of scratches their head. Do we do it again this year? Should we even go after it? So a couple things to think about. One is it really needs to fit in your larger marketing and business development objectives. You know, think of it sort of as just one spoke on the wheel. This is not all your marketing. This isn't the thing that's just going to get your phone to ring off the hook. So whether you decide to pursue it or not is really you have to drill down what you're looking to achieve. I'll give you an example. Let's say you're a local firm, a hyper local firm, and you're really, you know, I'll use Los Angeles or Southern California. You're really just, you know, getting business and representing clients within a very hyper specific space. Maybe Chambers shouldn't be part of your marketing mix. It might not really serve you in terms of helping you gain some more clients in your local market. Another example of firms that wouldn't go after Chambers is if you are marketing to the consumer. Plaintiff trial law firms, for example. That's an example of a firm that it might not make sense to go after Chambers. So you really have to think about it as a larger picture. There are a lot of reasons to pursue, and we have to include them on here. You know, one of the things that most people pursue Chambers for is recognition. They're getting that visibility. They're also getting that third-party credibility that we're all seeking. It's like a stamp of approval from someone else saying that you're, you know, one of the greatest lawyers or one of the greatest law firms. Also, it helps extend the shelf life of what you're doing. You know, all of the matters that you're working on, the transactions, you know, gives you an opportunity to really showcase your work through another channel. And two, for a lot of small firms especially, it levels the playing field. It's a great opportunity to sort of come up with the competition. And so if you're really competing against some of the big law firms, this is a great way. And then, you know, lastly, you know, think of it as a business development opportunity. As I mentioned before, there are a lot of in-house counsel and corporate counsel and others using Chambers as a guide to find lawyers. And two, you're found online a lot more easily. So, you know, when you're ranked in Chambers, you're listed on their website. And when people are searching you or a particular lawyer, the chances of you being found is much more easier when you've got that ranking. So there's a lot of reasons why you'd want to pursue. The other question we get a lot of is, does Chambers rank small firms? And the short answer is yes. You will see a lot of large firms dominate the Chambers list, but we've seen a much greater push to recognize smaller firms over the last decade. Chambers will tell you they do not look at size of law firm. That is not part of their guide. So So small firms, boutique firms can be included. Lastly, the one piece you really want to consider, and when you're answering the question, is it worth it for our firm, is that it is an every year endeavor. So if you decide to do it, don't think about just doing it for 1 year. This is really a long-term commitment. Even once you're included on the list, you can drop off. You need to go after it every single year. And just to give you a few of Berbay's facts, I mean, we spend on average anywhere between 40 and 60 hours per chamber submission. If it's a firm's first time submitting, usually that's upwards of 80 hours. So this is a big time commitment. And as you know, a lot of times you're bugging your clients to serve as referees, which I'll talk about a little bit later. So you really have to think about, do I want to do this every year? We wouldn't recommend someone who's just going to try it for a year or two and then pull the plug. So that's something to consider when you're answering the question, is it worth it? All right, so here's really what we're going to focus on today. How do you get ranked? How do you increase the likelihood of getting the coveted chambers ranking? So the first thing that we see right off the bat is firms submitting for the wrong area. So first off, if you are not ranked regionally, we would highly recommend that you're not going after the national ranking. You need to be ranked regionally in order to be considered for a national list, okay? So some firms make the mistake of submitting, let's say for litigation, and they're going for litigation, the national list, and it's really because their litigation practice is a national one. So it makes sense to go after the national ranking. But if they're not ranked regionally, it's nearly impossible to get that national ranking. We've never seen it before. So you really want to go after the regional rankings first, regardless of your practice. The other important piece that you want to think about in terms of submitting for the right area is, can you fill all 20 matters? So in chamber submission, there are 10 publishable matters and 10 confidential matters. You need to really fill all of those. If you're filling 17, 18, okay, but you really want to take advantage of every single one. So if you're putting forth a submission and you're only filling half the matters, that's a bit of a red flag. And so maybe you want to think about another area to submit. I'll give you an example. We were working with a litigation firm who was submitting for the litigation practice area, but many of their matters were sort of labor and employment focused. And so the question was, maybe we should gear it towards the labor and employment practice submission versus litigation. So really look at your matters and make sure that you're submitting for the right area and you can fill all 20 of those matters. It's really important. The next thing that you really want to, and this is always a hard one, is you have to have some realistic expectations when going after chambers. It's very unlikely that your first submission, you're going to get ranked. It happens, but it's more the exception and not the rule. So one of the things that we see firms do time and time again is they're trying to submit everyone. And frankly, not everyone warrants inclusion. And I think that this can be a challenge for a lot of in-house marketers or just firms in general, because they really want to spread the love, and sometimes there are internal politics at play. But you really have to put forth the right people. And I think that this comes down to managing expectations. There are some people that you sort of have to let down or maybe reconsider submitting them. And really, you want to focus on your best and your brightest. So, for example, chambers ask you for your matters for the last 12 months. So if you're one of your lawyers, or you're a lawyer and you had a less than average year, or maybe it didn't really reflect the kind of work that you do, you may want to pause and reconsider submitting. It's not to say that you shouldn't submit, but when you look at, let's say, 10 lawyers, look at who had the most activity and who was handling the most significant matters over the last 12 months. And that's really how you winnow it down, because your matters are very important in this process. So oftentimes we see, when we are working with law firms who have had trouble getting on this list, one of the things we see right off the bat is they're trying to rank too many people. And so when you're trying to put forth, let's say 15 people and you have 20 matters, well, each person can really only highlight one, maybe two matters, and it's not enough to get the ranking. Are you giving yourself enough time? This is a big one. So you have to start early. We've been doing this for a long time. Chambers is the most extensive nomination process that we've ever been part of. As I had mentioned before, how many hours we spend alone should signify how extensive it is. And so you really want to make sure you're not rushing through. For first timers, we recommend starting 4 months in advance. For others, 3 months. I mean, when we work with our firms, 3 months is a minimum. It takes a lot of time. And frankly, we just see a lot of people rushing through this and not having enough time to really shape and mold it to the best nomination. So this might seem like a simple tip, but it's really important. And we've just seen so many people try to do this in a couple of weeks, and it's just really not possible. Submit the right references. So for those that are not familiar with Chambers, there's a written submission form that includes the matters I was just referring to. And then there's something that they call referees. It's references is another word for it. Referees, there's up to 20 spots that you can put forth names of people that can talk about the caliber of your work. So this can be clients, this can be co-counsel. Usually most firms fill it with clients, but this is the most important aspect of Chambers. In fact, it is more weighted than the written submission itself. One of the issues that we've seen time and time again is that referees have a very low response rate. So typically Chambers sees a less than 30% response rate, which is really only a couple of people out of your 20 referees that you're putting forward. It's not a good number. I think, this is really because clients maybe don't have time for it, don't want to do the process. Maybe it even goes to their junk inbox, which happens a lot. So one of the things that we do that we highly recommend as part of this process is really think about the people that you're putting forward. Oftentimes we're putting forward people who are incredibly busy, who are not very responsive. And you want to really think about that. Even if they're the best contact, even if they're the most familiar with your work, think about going after the second in command or someone that might be more responsive. Again, if you feel like your client's not going to respond, the best bet is to put forth someone else. The other aspect that's really important to this process is you need to prepare your referees. So you need to tell them that a Chambers researcher is going to be contacting them. You need to give them the questions that they're going to be asking in advance. This all helps with the responsive aspect. It also helps your client prepare. The researchers aren't looking to spend a great deal of time with your clients. They usually only have about a 10-minute phone call, maybe 15 minutes. And so the more your client or your referee is prepared, the better that the better these interviews are going to go, and the higher chance they're going to actually respond. So that's it. So a lot of people just sort of put names on the list and submit it to Chambers without really talking those folks through the process. And the last piece is, you're allowed to submit up to 20. You really need to fill this out. And we believe that this is weighted much more than the written submission. So if you don't have enough matters to fill, this is where it's at. This is where you need to fill all 20 names, and 20 names that you think is really going to respond to them. So the B10 section, so in the written submission, this is another really good pointer, is the written submission has something called the B10 section. And the B10 section is essentially the essay portion of the nomination. It's a one-page, they have specific questions, and it's an opportunity to sell yourself. And I think that this is one of the most overlooked aspects of the Chambers written submission, because everybody's so focused on the matters and what are we going to put forth, and people just gloss over this section. So you really want to spend some time here, and again, this is where starting early comes. One of the things that we recommend is not duplicating anything in your written submission. So for example, if you've listed some particular matters, don't mention those matters in the B10 section. They're already somewhere else in the written submission. So it's really important that you don't duplicate. Find other things that you can highlight, other matters, maybe things that couldn't get included, maybe even older matters that were more significant or precedent setting. And this is really important for those that maybe didn't have a great year, but you can highlight some of the other career successes that you've had. The other thing is, please avoid marketing fluff. What Chambers doesn't want to see is like, I'm a unparalleled attorney specializing in XYZ, or, clients turn to me for XYZ. I mean, these are the kinds of things that this is a bio. They are already looking at your website bio. They're doing a lot of research. They don't want to see that. If you're going to say something like that, you need to back it up with something substantive. You need to prove it. There's got to be evidence there of why you're the greatest and best and brightest attorney out there. So really take advantage of doing that. And again, just don't repeat anything else you had. So really, like, dig for other information that you might be able to include. All right, so I keep talking about sort of how the matters matter and fill all 20 and, make sure you really fill up the space. But one of the things that's really important to help increase your likelihood of getting this ranking is really drilling down what is significant. Okay, so one of the things is, don't change the form, please. Chambers begs people not to do this, so stick to the questions that they're asking. But you want to really go beyond a basic description of your matter. You have to underscore anything unique. What were the challenges that you faced? What was the significance? And significance doesn't have to just be dollar amount. Significance can be the issues at play. It could be legal nuances. It could be strategies that you use that were unique. It could be matters of first impression. It could change society or change the legal landscape. Figure out what is significant about your matter and focus on that. Just for reference, you have to think that, these folks, these researchers, they're reading hundreds and thousands of these submissions. And so they're hard to get through. So the important thing is you really want to sell yourself. You really want to tell a story. And this is a great way to do it in your matters. Really amp them up. Talk about all of the unique aspects and all of the challenges that you faced. Okay, moving on. You want to be in contact with the researcher. This is also really important. Once you submit, you should introduce yourself to the researcher. Let them know that you're going to be the point of contact for the firm. Also check in with them on referees. The researchers are allowed to tell you how many referees have responded. The challenge is they won't tell you who because of confidentiality. They want to respect the people who have been put forth. So they'll say, we've only heard from 3 of your referees. But if you keep in touch with them, you can also help propel that process for them. So if they've got a low response rate, maybe you can start reaching out to some of your clients and asking them to respond, or being part of the process of the Chambers researcher can follow up again. Last but not least is Chambers Confidential. So if you feel like you're not making any progress, you've been doing this for a long time, Chambers has something that you can purchase. It's basically a report that gives you some more feedback into their research process. What are the things that they're looking at for your firm? Maybe one of the reasons why you're not ranked. Or one of the things that they're truly looking for in the next year's submission. And so this can be really insightful. I think there's a fee that you pay for, of course, and this isn't guarantee that you're going to get ranked the next year, but it really gives you some guidance. And this is produced by Chambers, so you're really hearing it from the horse's mouth. And I think that this is a great guide that you can purchase if you truly haven't been making any inroads. So that is how you get ranked. I wanna now at this time, I wanna bring in Ali Crea. She is Berbay's account director, and she has worked on many of Chambers nominations, and she is, has done this year after year. And I would like to do a short Q&A with her to talk about some of the important aspects of Chambers. So Ali, I think you are on.
Hi. Hey, Megan.
Hello. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So we're talking about the world of chambers, as you know it.
Yes.
And what I did, Allie, is I compiled a list of questions, all which you've heard many times before, of just frequently asked questions. So we're going to start with the first one, okay, which is,
Great.
once I'm on the list, do I have to submit a nomination again and again?
It's a very good question. And yes, you do. There's no exception. I mean, it's very difficult to drop off the list, but if you aren't keeping up with the process and submitting your work each year, you won't move up the ranks and eventually could lead to you falling off. So you want to avoid that altogether. And it's just really good practice to submit year after year.
Yeah, and I talked about the every year endeavor and really thinking about that before you embark on chambers. Okay.
Absolutely.
Can I ask for extensions? We know we get a lot of those.
The short answer is yes. You should notify chambers as soon as you know that you can't meet their deadline. Almost always they'll say to get your referees in on time, and then perhaps can give you an extra week or two to get the written submission in. But we really think this works against you. So do everything in your power to work towards that deadline and submit on time, because we just don't want any kind of negative feedback. And we do think it hurts a little bit if you are late.
Should you stay in front of chambers in other ways? This is a really great question.
It is, and you should. I mean, the researchers change year after year, but you can certainly keep the editorial department updated on deals that are happening, successes, big wins, or anything along those lines, because they like to receive that information. And an easy way to do that is to just send them press releases if you have your marketing team distributing them. And you can easily email it to chambers, and they have a very easy email, which is pressreleases@chambers.com. So very easy to do, and we recommend keeping them updated.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Is there a limit to how many nominations you can submit?
There is no limit, but Megan, you touched on this prior, that you really need to be judicious about the nominations you're going after and really being realistic. It's really about having realistic expectations. So you don't want to go after everything in chambers, and it's a very tough list to make. So keeping that in mind, going after the practice areas that you really think are worthwhile is the best strategy. Don't go after everything.
Yeah, good tip. Okay. What if my clients never respond? And this is something that we encounter all the time, because I think we always hear from the researchers that they're getting such a low response rate. So what if this happens year after year for firms?
Yeah, it's a big issue. And if they don't respond and you continue to get low engagement rates, you really need to start thinking of new names to put forward. And, again, Megan, you talked about this earlier. Maybe it's not putting the top person at your company or the client's company that you're going to submit. Maybe it's second in command or someone who is going to be more responsive. It's really in your favor to put people forward who will respond. So that means talking to your clients in advance. And if they don't seem eager, or maybe are a little bit hesitant and they're just really, really busy, absolutely coming up with new names is the best thing you can do.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. What are the up and coming or associate to watch lists? So these are a little bit newer. We've seen sort of chambers put out lists that help recognize younger partners or associates. Can you talk a little bit about what these lists are?
Absolutely. So in addition to the 1 through 6 bands in chambers, which are the rankings for more senior partner level attorneys, there's 3 additional banks. They are the up and coming lists, which really are for those attorneys that don't have an established reputation yet, but they've been driving the firm's growth. So that's for up and coming. There's a list for associates to watch. And these are really senior associates that who have put forward great work, but they're really working on the background of major deals. So they're not the lead, but they really have a major part. And then the third is the watch list. And so this is really just individuals, and they're typically partner level, that Chambers has deemed, really catches their eye and is a good signifier that they'll probably be ranked maybe the next year or really short after.
That's great. And chambers will tell you these
Mhm.
lists. They'll tell you who the watch lists are, correct?
Absolutely. As long as you ask and, are in contact with the researcher, they'll let you
Right.
know if any of the attorneys are on the watch list.
Great. And just for the folks listening, this is separate from Chambers Confidential. So this is some feedback that you can get without paying a fee. Should I buy, speaking of other fees, should I buy
Mhm.
the Chambers profile if I get ranked? We get a lot of questions about purchasing the profile.
So if you get ranked, there are many pros to buying a profile. It gives you more visibility on the Chamber's website. It helps with Google search engines. So there's pros there, but you really need to think about if it's one, worth the cost, and where it fits within your overall and larger marketing initiatives. It's something really to consider, and think about it as a way to really profile your firm or the individual in your own way. So it gives you that control. So it's something to consider.
Yeah, I think it's a good point too, because when you set up your Chambers profile, you really get the opportunity to position yourself however you'd like through that profile. So it just gives people an added opportunity to really showcase their work.
Absolutely.
What if I don't get interviewed by Chambers? Is that a bad sign?
We get this question all the time, and it's not. You don't need to worry about that at all. It's not a sign. It's really a random selection. Chambers can't speak to every contact at every firm. There's just too many. So it's really a random process. We don't know how they select it, but it's random. So it's something you shouldn't worry about.
Yeah, and we've seen firms who get interviews every single year and others that don't, and others every other year. So it is really random from our perspective. Okay. Should I do this in-house or hire an agency like Berbay? So when we get these calls, we're always talking about this. So
Yeah.
do people hire a Berbay? What do you think?
I think there's a lot of pros to an agency like Berbay. You mentioned earlier, this is a really extensive process, anywhere from 40 to 60 or even 80 hours. So if you hire an outside firm, you have really a team of specialists at your disposal. They come with the bench strength to draft compelling nominations. They have the capability to juggle all the moving parts. It's really time consuming, and an agency like ours has dedicated resources, so we can really get the process done. I will say there is a benefit for someone in-house to do it because there is company familiarity, so that's always a plus. But really, the pros of an agency is that they can come in with fresh set of eyes, take a look at the nomination, maybe even develop nominations and include portions that you wouldn't have thought of without outside input. So that's always a benefit. And really, if you haven't been making inroads with Chambers for several years, I think it would be good to consider an outside agency that can help propel you or change up the nomination as needed.
Yeah, fresh eyes, so to speak. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. What if after 5 years of submissions, I'm still not ranked? Then what? In the poll, there's a lot of people. There was about 15% of people who have been going after this for 5 years or more. So, and maybe they've gotten some success with a lawyer or two, or maybe the firm, but maybe there's someone that just year after year after year. So what do they do then?
Well, I think it goes back to our previous question. You may need to hire an outside agency like Berbay. If you haven't made progress, you really need someone to take a look at the nomination and what's being done wrong, or if there are ways to improve it. Berbay, an agency like ours, really knows how to draft compelling nominations. We've been doing it for a very long time. So I think that's a great reason to hire an agency. But I will add that you should be asking Chambers for feedback on the submission each year. If you're not, you could be making the same mistakes year after year without even knowing it. So that's an important tip.
Yeah, and I think when we've done that with some firms, some of the feedback is really insightful. It gives us at least some direction, because if a firm came to us and said, I haven't been ranked for 5 years, not only are we going to look at and assess their previous nominations, but we're going to talk to Chambers. We're going to get on the phone with them. We're going to email them and get at least some feedback so we can work with something. So that's a great point. Okay, how do I determine my chances beforehand? It's a good question.
It is a good question. There's no set right or wrong checklist, but I think your matters and the people you want to put forth are the most important assessment that Megan talked about in the presentation. Also, if you have responsive referees, those who are willing to participate, those are a huge benefit. So, I mean, the matters that you put forth are important, but as Megan said, and when we say this over and over, having responsive referees is really important and provides a lot of value. So if you have all those components, then your chances are good for having a very strong nomination. But it's a tough list again, and if it's your first year submitting, it's very hard to get ranked your first year. It's a marathon, not a race, so it's going to take a lot of submissions to eventually get ranked by chambers.
Yeah, good advice. And I think too, it's for first time submissions, I think it's difficult because chambers, they're covering the world, and so this is the first time that they may have been introduced to this firm, this attorney, and so they really need to find out sort of more about where that firm and attorney ranks. So I think it's a good advice of it's not a race, it's a marathon. So okay, last question here. How do I move up bands? So we didn't talk too much about this, but as Ali had mentioned, there's bands 1 through 6, 1 being the best and 6 being a lower band. And there's sort of ways that you can move up. And I think one of the things we see a lot is some lawyers who are stuck in a band and can't seem to make any progress. So what are your thoughts on that?
It's a very good question, and it's a hard question to answer, because there's no real formula to follow that will say, if you do these 3 things, you'll move up a band. But I think everything we talked about is really important to follow and will help with you submitting really compelling nominations and increase your chances of getting ranked and then moving up the bands, which means, really strong matters, completing the nomination in full, putting forth really great referees who are going to be responsive and really speak to the work you do, and doing that year after year. So that's really key. You have to keep doing it. And each year your nomination, submission should be better than last, although that can't always happen. Just making sure you're doing it consistently is our best advice, because it may take 1 year for someone to move up a band or ranking, or it can take 3 years. It's really, we can't give a concrete time frame, but following those steps are really, really going to get you on the path to moving up the bands.
Yeah, and we've seen both, certainly. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Ali. This was really helpful. I know, there's a lot of people who can get very frustrated with the process, and especially the amount of time that everybody's devoting to these submissions, and not including everything else that they're working on and keeping moving. So I think this is some really great insight and gives people some thought. So I want to thank you, Ali, for joining us, and also just thanks to everyone who listened in. We really appreciate it. We will be making these slides available. The presentation is recorded, so if you ever want to look back at it or share it with colleagues, and we'll be taking any questions after the presentation. So if you have specific questions about chambers, Ali and I are both happy to get on the phone with you or talk to you, and even give you some insights some specific insights for your firm for future submissions. So thanks again for listening. Stay tuned for more of our webinars, and we appreciate all your attendance. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Bye.